everyone. It's David Ault, and I want to welcome you to The Gathering. I want to go back to something that I used to do a lot in the live presentations when I would speak to you, and that is to share a moment of invoking a presence, a wisdom. That wisdom we come to realize is not outside of us, it's here. But this moment of pause and this invitation that we extend communally together is more of an unveiling. It's a recognizing of that wisdom. So if you would, wherever you are, take a moment with me and breathe. I find sometimes if I close my eyes, I can just give myself a little bit of a visual vacation from the stimulus around me and go within. Take that breath. And in that breath, simply recognize and create a welcoming of this wisdom that knows no time, that knows no space or boundary. It is a wisdom of the ancients. It is a wisdom that is contained within an infinite intelligence that weaves itself through all of life, and it weaves itself through us. All that it needs and requires is the invitation and the recognition that it already exists. And so we do that now together, knowing that by simply breathing and saying you are welcomed here, that there are layers of forgetfulness and human illusion that are lifted in that moment. And that's a beautiful thing. And so we feel that layering of forgetfulness, perhaps our human despair, easing for a moment so that we can speak and collaborate and co-create together something that feeds our heart and our soul. Take a deep breath. And so it is. So I needed that today. There's been a feeling, an undercurrent that's been happening in me personally over the last couple of weeks. And the way human life unfolds and the busyness of things, I really didn't take the time to sit with it. There were two big funerals, celebrations of life for elder women that were very meaningful in my life. And I was asked to lead these services. And so there was a lot of preparatory work, a lot of communing with the loved ones of these people. And so the fragility and the preciousness of human life and the finite nature of all of that was very much present. And also the interfacing with family and the delicacy of how to best represent these lives was also before me. And that's an interesting thing. How do you speak about and encapsulate the soul of someone who had such rich and deep meaning and connection for other people in just a little tiny service? So those assignments are both thrilling and daunting, and also, too, I set aside my own personal human feelings around these people in order to be of optimum service. So that was going on. And then there was also our big executive board quarterly meeting for my foundation, Kaleidoscope Child Foundation, where all of us around the world gathered together in order to assess and to go over and to implement and to review all of the many, many things that are happening with our organization. And that was a lot of work also. And so that happened yesterday. And when it was all over, I could feel all of that kind of heightened adrenaline in my body settle. And that put me in touch with that feeling again. And so I sat outside. It was a beautiful day, and I sat outside when the meeting was over and everyone left. And I was just breathing, and it felt sad, which was strange because so many good things are happening. But there was this wave of sadness and overwhelm. And when I really sat with it, what I was feeling was hopelessness. And I thought, well, where is this coming from? And I know that as I review snippets of news, as I review the world through the lens of my own humanity, that there are many things that do not match the speed of my wants, my human wants for justice, my human wants for world reconciliation, my human wants for the nurturing and the restoration of people who are experiencing just the unfathomable agony of war. How my humanness wanted all of this to be over, how my humanness wanted justice for those that I perceived to be inflicting pain upon the world, my humanness in wanting justice to take place with regards to people who did not have the best interest of humanity from my human perspective. And all of this, and I realized that I just had not digested all of that in a way that it was just sort of sitting in this parking lot, of my mental parking lot. But I was doing all these other things, and now when those things were over, it was like that parking lot, I was in the midst of it, and I felt hopeless. Perhaps you can relate to some of that. And my beautiful partner came and sat outside with me and asked me if I was okay. And I said, I realize that what I'm feeling, what this strange thing that's been hanging over me for a while, is this feeling of hopelessness. And as we talked about that, he was sharing many things in his life that led him to where he is today. And that he put it this way. He says, I have a low tolerance for my hopelessness, my human despair and pain. And he was telling me about his reactionary behavior to hopelessness and the lineage of that in his life. And he looked at me and he goes, you have a really high tolerance for hopelessness. And I had never thought of it that way. I had never looked at it or perceived that somehow there was this immense interior container that could tolerate hopelessness up to a degree. And so we realized that our arrival in just collapsing and having to surrender to these feelings was it's the same, but it happens, it meets the shore of our humanness at various times and in various ways. And he says, you have a high tolerance for that. And so I thought about that. I thought, what creates a high tolerance for hopelessness and despair? And as I looked at that and I was reflecting on just human history, my own path and my own life, I think when you see it and when you're involved in it, whether it be through my history with Louise Hay and the up close and personal relational components of people dying of AIDS, how you sort of go numb. There's as Ram Dass used to call it, a professional warmth that begins to happen. Being overseas and seeing the immensity of poverty and discrimination and inequality among developing countries and children, having that spark the disassociation and memories of my own upbringing in that regard, you see that sometimes I would call it in order to survive and in order to manage and to be in the world, one can craft this big repository for hopelessness and still function. And I'm not special in that regard at all. Many people, I think many of us do that. I remember when I lived in Los Angeles, there was this play that I was invited to go see. And the title of the play was called Low Level Panic. And I can't even tell you what the play was about, but I remember being so captivated by that title because I saw a universality in that title, that many of us operate with a low level panic, and we can tolerate a certain maximization of that panic until we can't. And that's what I was feeling yesterday. And I know that you have that too. I know that there is a container of tolerance for hopelessness until we can't do it anymore. And so that's the part that I want to speak about, the part where we reach the cliff's edge and we don't know what to do. And so your cliff's edge of hopelessness, despair, disappointment, sorrow, despair, sorrow, despair, sorrow, the cyclical nature of all of that, it doesn't really matter. But what happens at that cliff's edge? And my partner said to me yesterday, he goes, I think what happens is that when we get to that cliff's edge, that is the moment of surrender, and not the kind of egoic surrender or human surrender with shallow things, but the deep soul surrender. And we don't arrive at the cliff's edge one time. I think it is cyclical. And I think that each time that we arrive and each time we are willing to surrender meaning that we don't kind of buck up and just go back to expanding our container of tolerance, but that we go beyond the container of tolerance to a vulnerability where we realize that there is something greater outside of us, that it isn't our job or our role to try to expand that container to tolerate hopelessness, but it is to give it away, to surrender, to let go of all of the egoic structure that says that we have to control it. And it's scary. It's really quite something. And I realized that so much of what my human framework was needing, all of this justice, all of this stuff, I couldn't take one more time reading something that says we've uncovered this, dossier of wrongdoing, and then nothing happening. And I believe that that's what has blanketed us as Americans, but we're certainly not special in that regard. There are many cultures and people around the world that have been going through this generation after generation, that there just doesn't seem to be an opportunity to take a break. And so I want to suggest that, as absurd as that sounds, that is a holy moment of realization when we are aware that the container of that hopelessness is jammed. It's spewing over, because there is something beyond that. That's where the dualism is seen, and that's where we have the opportunity to do a genuine falling to our knees of surrender of that dualism, and to prostrate ourselves before an intelligence that knows far greater than us. We can say pithy quotes like the moral arc of justice bends far, and it may take some time, but it does happen. We can say all of those things, but we can still walk around holding that in balance with a despair that it might not happen. But surrender is that kind of surrender that I'm talking about, is asking for us to let go of all doubt. That kind of surrender demands of us that all margin of error, all doubt in the meticulousness of a divine design be handed over, be placed upon an altar of such surrender that we're not holding anything back from our surrendering as a sort of safety net. Well, I'm going to surrender, but I'm going to hold on to this little piece of my ego that likes to have some footing in control. No, what I'm going to do is I'm going to surrender it all. I'm going to bare myself naked before the vulnerability of a world that does not seem to work. And in doing that, hear this word, there is a demandment. There is a demandment that happens in the relationship between the soul of me and the divinity that surrounds everything to be seen. There is a demandment that all of the visual and all of the mental hurdles and veils that have prevented me from interfacing with that divinity, that spiritual morality, not my human framework of morality, but the spiritual moral compass that has never moved. The demandment is there that I cannot help but see it. So that is the calm that exists within wisdom teachers, sages, masters, people that walk the face of the earth that no one knows. They are the light workers. They are those that walk among us, bringing wholeness just by their presence. They have surrendered somehow the illusion, because you see, my hopelessness is built on a foundation of illusion, meaning that this human thing that you and I are experiencing isn't an illusional truth that doesn't discard the pain and the suffering that we're experiencing, but it is that we are experiencing in the illusion, in the movie, is a small t of truth. The capital truth, capital T of truth, is a divinity that is unshakable. It is the divine design. It is the infallibility of God. And we can speak about it incessantly. We can train. We can read about it. We can spout it off. But there must come a time in our individuated surrendering that we see it and feel it and experience it and embody it in a way that is beyond words. And you see, that is the touchstone. That is the thing that allows us then, even in the waffling, even in the cyclical nature of the ebb and the flow, knowing the capital T truth and then going back to small t truth and then the capital T truth. It's the only thing that helps us breathe when we have these moments of hopelessness. And so what I want to invite you to consider is to find a way to surrender. Surrender the control. Surrender the fear of the finances. Surrender the fear of what's going to happen to me. Surrender the irrelevancy that questions whether or not anyone will love us, hear us, see us, appreciate us, want us. Surrender the fear of the decline of our physical instruments. Surrender the injustices of the world. Surrender it all in your own kind of ceremony. Burn something. Journal something. get quiet. Block out an hour or a day or a week where you remove yourself from the noise of the world. Turn off the news. Turning off the news is a form of surrender. It can be if it's done mindfully, not to avoid, but to go deeper so that you can hear, so that I can hear, so that the noise doesn't drown out that still small guidance that is always there every single moment of every single day, whispering to us and beckoning us back to that divine remembering. So it isn't complicated. Surrendering isn't complicated. It doesn't have to have any kind of formality to it. All that it needs is the energy of our willingness. And so yesterday, sitting out in our backyard when all of that busyness was done, and my partner said, you know, you have a high tolerance for hopelessness. I realized that's not something to be proud of. That's not actually an accomplishment. It's actually a postponement of actually surrendering, where he doesn't have such a high tolerance, and so he surrenders quicker. And it doesn't matter when or how we do it, but the point is that you can see that the experience of hopelessness and the incessant noise of the world is not the finality, that there is something beyond that. It isn't our business to try and make anyone else be something or do something. That the ultimate caretaker within us is of our own inner awareness, cultivating our own inner garden, cleaning up our own metaphoric backyard. These are all of the things that are critical for our soul's purpose and assignment. And so I ask you to surrender with me today. Surrender the things that feel hopeless. Find a way to breathe them and give them back. Find a way not to bury your head in the sand or quote, quote, take a vacation from it. But surrendering is to surrender the fallacy, the illusion of all of those things. So I don't know what that piece in your ceremony will look like. I'd be curious to hear from you what that might be, because we can all learn from one another. But whatever path of surrender that you go upon, today's a good day to renew that. And in doing so, may you feel the return of a breath of knowing, a breath of hope, a breath of peace, a breath of reconciliation, so that as we participate in that, we can now be that for other people as well. All my love to you. May you experience that renewal for yourself. God bless.